So let's take a look at this post by someone who got fired from their job. I got fired from my job because I was really unhappy and was also vocal about it. And I was also caught taking interviews for other jobs on company time. It's a weird situation because I liked my job and was good at it, but I hated the company I worked for. I'm feeling all sorts of things: shock, relief, anxiety, excitement. Any tips for how to process big events like this? Thanks in advance. I love this community. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go into more detail in a second, but like, what does it mean for like, how do you process this? Like, what is the process of processing? So I've worked with a lot of people who have gone through large events, right? Everything from having their first child to getting fired to being sexually assaulted. And so how do you help someone? What is the process of organizing this experience? And like, how do you come out of it on the other side as healthy as possible, right? So what can we learn from this? That's what we're going to dig into. But before we do that, we need a little bit more detail. Okay? For sure. It's a really long story, but I'll do my best. I was an employee at I was an employee-owned company that did really well with a bunch of invested, passionate workers. During the pandemic, the company got sold to a mega large corporation, and they started making changes. The changes were expected, but most of them were really unfair. Cutting our sick days more than half, worse benefits, no options to become an owner leader in the company. Worse than that was the way that the new company communicated the changes. Never being straightforward, always trying to make the changes seem good for us, but when you took a closer look, they were basically all negatives. I found that at best unkind and careless, and at worst insulting and dishonest. I would regularly talk about how upset this behavior made me with coworkers that I was close with, and with some higher up managers that I really felt comfortable talking to. Silly me. We're going to zero in on that statement later, okay? So remember that. I also spoke up occasionally in meetings when things were really bad. I basically felt like I deserved to be treated better, and at the very least deserved honesty. And that all of us from the old company deserved to be treated better, because they were a really strong team and really well respected in the industry. In general, I'm someone that struggles with perfectionism, toxic productivity, and letting my emotions be governed by external circumstances or successes. Sound familiar? I've never really failed anything, much less been fired. Another really important thing to point out, okay? Because that'll come in. I've been in therapy for a bit, but I'm still learning to feel my emotions instead of suppressing them. But it sometimes is still scary or hard for me. I fall back on my coping mechanism when I'm stressed a lot. Some healthy, gym, going for walks, and some not, smoking a ton of dope. I guess I'm just looking for some support and tips for processing the feelings in a healthy way. Even typing this out feels like it's helped already. Look at that. Hope that clarifies a bit. Okay? So, what does it mean to process? As we go through life, things happen to us, right? And those things aren't necessarily good. And when bad things happen to us, there's this idea that like, if you process it correctly, you'll be like stronger afterward, right? So so everyone's kind of thinking like, oh, like I'm still processing, like I want to process, like, I need to process this. How do I process this correctly? But I've never seen anyone that says, here is how you process. Here are the steps. Here are the goals. This is what we should do. Here's the game plan. Okay. If you do this stuff, you will process and it'll be great. Now we learn this stuff as clinicians, right? We don't, even then, like I was never taught in therapy, like this is what you do. It was never described to me like that. It's like, here are the skills that we teach. Here's a bunch of weird like psychological principles like Jung's shadow, the Oedipal complex. Here's Erikson's stages of conflict and growth and stuff like that. Here's Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization. Here's Aaron Beck's model of the mind. Here's Judith Beck's like improvement on the model of the mind. Here's Sigmund Freud's theories. Here's Anna Freud's defense mechanisms. But nowhere in my therapy training, which was okay, but maybe not the best. Who knows? I'm not saying it isn't taught elsewhere. No one was like, when someone comes in, here's what you should do, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So we get some of that with cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy or manualized therapy. So we do get that, right? But we don't get that for something like this, right? So as therapy, you'll learn manualized treatment for here's how you deal with someone who has a social phobia, right? Like here's exposure therapy. Here are the steps of exposure therapy. But in training to become a therapist, you focus on clinical problems. You don't focus on non-clinical problems. So they don't you're not going to learn if you become a psychiatrist or a psychologist, at least in most places, you're not going to learn what's the game plan? What's the manualized treatment for someone who's been fired for the first time in their life? Because it's not an illness, right? So we'll have manualized treatments for illness, but we won't have manualized treatments for stuff that happens in life. So now what I'd like to do today is talk to y'all a little bit about what it means to process. And so this too, therapists can absolutely help you do, because we learn all the steps for clinical stuff. And then practically in our day job, we learn how to adapt these things to non-clinical things, right? So therapists can help you with this stuff, but it's not something that's formally taught. So let's talk a little bit about how do I process? Okay. So the first thing is we have to define processing. So here's what I would say, this is just my kind of off-the-cuff example or framework for understanding processing. So the first thing that I'd say is that events have emotional impacts. Okay? So if you get fired, for example, you're going to feel betrayed. You're going to feel taken advantage of. You're going to feel incompetent, right? So you feel like the company let you down. Maybe this person is feeling betrayed by that manager that they were talking to. They're going to feel abandoned. They're going to feel inadequate, right? Because they've never been fired before. There's two kinds of people in this world, right? There are people who get promoted and people who get fired. And the people who get fired are people who are incompetent, right? So we'll get to that in a second. So you may be feeling all this kind of stuff. And then this in turn, these emotions are going to have impacts on your body or your life. Okay. So let's remember that these emotional impacts are not just in your mind, right? So you may have difficulty sleeping. You may have difficulty with motivation. You may feel it's hard to apply for a job or go to an interview. You may feel jaded, right? And this is where we'll talk about this for a second. Or you may feel jaded, right? So all these things are happening, okay? So one step of processing is going to be dealing with these emotions. And this is sort of the most common thing that people will think about, right? It's to no longer feel guilty and ashamed. But then there's more to it. So remember that from the Vedic psychology of the mind, when we feel negative emotions, we have this part of our mind called the ego. And the ego's goal is to help us feel better about ourselves and to develop a sense of identity that helps us navigate the world. So emotions then relate to our identity. So this is where, remember how we said feeling inadequate? So we'll use this as an example. There are two kinds of people in this world. I have never been fired, right? And let's look at what this person's identity is. So, I liked my job and was good at it. Was good at my job, right? And was also I worked at an employee-owned company that did really well. Passionate workers. So did well. Passionate. Right? So now let's kind of look at this for a second. Right? So here's number 1, number 2, number 3. So how do you think, before this person got fired, how do you think they thought about themselves, right? I'm a dedicated person. I'm a hard worker. I'm a good worker. I did well enough to where the company got acquired during the pandemic. This is who I am. Oh, thanks for the tons of subs, gifted subs, Razmi, please. So this is how you view yourself, right? And then you get fired. And then now suddenly there's a huge discrepancy between these two things. Because here's one kind of person and here's another kind of person. Who gets fired? People who are lazy, people who are incompetent, Those are the people that get fired, right? We have this sort of societal conditioning that this is how you get fired. And so this creates an identity conflict. And then this in turn is going to affect your behaviors. Okay? So once our identity gets kind of confused, right? Like, are we like, am I a good worker or a bad worker? Like, what kind of worker am I? So, and then you may say like, well, why is that relevant? Like, what do you mean by that? So this is what I mean. So when you go to a job interview, like, how confident are you going to be? Right? Like, what are you? Are you a loser that got fired? Or are you like someone who is a passionate hard worker who built something with a team of people? Like, it's kind of confusing. So processing involves resolving this identity conflict so that it no longer negatively shapes your behaviors, right? So if we don't resolve it, we can have negative behaviors. And then if we do resolve it, we can actually have positive behaviors after that. So let's just look at like the job application and the interview process, which is going to be affected by like me getting fired, okay? So am I a good worker? Am I a bad worker? I don't really know. And so if we think about how we get affected by things, so we can see this in the case of trauma as well, right? So let's say that I get, I go through a traumatic experience. So like I go to, let's say like I'm driving a car one day and I get hit by another car. So there's going to be like some kind of emotional impact. I'm going to feel afraid, right? And then like I'm going to start to wonder, am I a bad driver? So then like there's fear, right? And then there's like good driver or bad driver. So I used to pride myself on being a good driver because I had never been in an accident. I'm a good driver. I've never been in an accident. There are all these people out there who are competent drivers. They get into accidents all the time. So there's like an emotional element. And then we can see even in this simple example, like automatically, like, am I a good driver or am I a bad driver? And you have to kind of like think through that, work through that. It can even affect your behavior. It's like now what's going to happen is I'm going to drive less. Why? Because maybe I'm a bad driver. Oh my God, right? So my confidence is affected. So it's going to affect my behavior. So if we think about processing, so what would be the goal of like therapy with this person is to like help them, digest this fear, help them resolve their identity and help them like move their behaviors in the right direction. So what would that look like in this case, right? So this is where like, if I was this person's, if I was working with this person or advising this person, like it's not necessarily like a therapeutic thing. So I'm not offering medical advice here, but like even for my friends, for example, who have been fired, here's how I would help them kind of reconceptualize things. I've reconceptualized things myself, so I can offer this example as well. So, I would start by sort of acknowledging what you're feeling, right? And sort of like recognize that this is important. So it starts with acknowledgement. Then what I'd also do for emotional processing is adjust kind of behaviors related to emotion. I know we talked about behaviors down here, but what I mean by this is like I'd start doing things like going for a walk, spending time in nature, maybe journaling, right? And people may be like, oh, but what good does journaling do? Boom. 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 That's all you need, right? So like they didn't say it over here. This was the first version of the post. And then I asked them for more information. I commented on this post, which sometimes I do from time to time. And then they wrote this. And somehow adding this element seems to have helped some. So this is the process of acknowledging your emotions, right? And somehow that's like in and of itself is like healthy and helps people, right? And then you can also definitely like, depending on the scale of what you're processing, therapy is definitely an option and in fact recommended depending on what happened to you, right? So if you had a seriously traumatic experience, like if you were assaulted or something like that, then I think you should absolutely go see a therapist. You can also do things like coaching, but that also depends on the severity of what you're dealing with. So this is where if you're not sure which one's appropriate, I would start with just like going to see your primary care physician, your general practitioner, say, hey, I'm going through this. Do you think this is something that I would need to see a therapist for? Right? So you should have some kind of medical relationship. If you don't have any medical relationship with a general practitioner or primary care physician, that everyone should get, right? So like basic advice is everyone should get an annual physical and see a doctor at least once a year. So start there. And the reason for that is like, you can ask them questions like this, right? And general practitioners, they may not be psychiatrists, but they'll be able to say like, okay, like they'll be able to do basic assessments, right? They're competent in mental health. And they'll say, you know what? I think that you would benefit from a referral. So coaches can also help with this kind of stuff, assuming it's non-clinical in nature. So if you have like PTSD or something, coaching is not appropriate. But if you're trying to figure out like how to, you know, help, like how to manage your emotions and prepare for a job interview, that's something that's more aligned with coaching. Okay. Next thing that happens is your identity. And so this is where you got to do some work. Okay. So oftentimes the work that we have to do with, when I say you have to do some work with identity, what I mean by that, is this not highlight? No. Okay. I guess not. Whatever. What I mean by that is that you have to sort of come to terms with who you are now and like do some kind of work. So I'll give you guys an example of what I did. So there are smart kids and there are stupid kids. Smart kids have good GPAs. This is what used to happen in my mind. Stupid kids have bad GPAs. Okay. Smart kids become doctors. And stupid kids don't become doctors. So, I'm applying to medical school, right? Am I a smart kid or I'm a stupid kid? I was told growing up that I'm a smart kid, but I have a bad GPA, and I certainly haven't been getting into medical school. So my ego was hurting. My identity was hurting. I felt like, you know, am I stupid or am I smart? I felt dumb. And I started to like really think about it and kind of work through it. And then what happens is at some point, and I imagine this is the case for this person as well, I wound up in a medical school interview. Right? So, and this person will probably wind up in a job interview at some point. And if you've gotten fired, one of the most terrifying things to think about is like, they're going to ask you what happened at your last job. And then you don't want to say or admit and because all the shame that comes with like, I was fired, because then they're going to think you're in this bucket, right? But you like, don't want to lie. So like, how do you manage that? So here's what I said in my medical interview. And they asked me like, what's up with your GPA? And I said, well, like when I was in college, like I really didn't know what I wanted to do in life. And so I didn't apply myself in school. And so I got a bad GPA. This is the third year I'm applying to medical school. You know, I've taken more and more classes since then. If you look at the last 2 years of the classes I've taken, my GPA is pretty good. So I realized like, this is actually what I want to do. And I recognize that a lot of people would have quit because good GPAs are a requirement to get into medical school. And I recognize that I don't meet that requirement. But I'm dedicated to doing this. I've worked my ass off. I've gotten a good GPA the last 2 years. And if y'all let me into your school, I can guarantee you I'm not going to slack off. I've slacked off once in my life, and I've learned the consequences of slacking off. And I can guarantee you that I will work really, really hard if given this opportunity. And even though I've been given other opportunities to switch careers, this is what I'm really dedicated towards. I realize it's a long shot, but I have my heart set on it. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. You own it, right? So like that's an identity thing that you have to arrive at that conclusion. And you have to say, I don't have a good GPA, but it's not about being a smart kid or a stupid kid. Like neither of those things apply. I did not talk about smart or stupid at all. I want to become a doctor. This is what I want. This is what I have. This is what I can offer. And so very concretely, like this person is going to be thinking a little bit about what to say in a job interview because you got fired, right? So this is what I would, if I was in this person's shoes, this is what I would say. So I'm dedicated and I'm hardworking. I was at an employee-owned company and we did such a good job during the pandemic that a public company wanted to acquire us. Once the public company acquired us, they started to institute some changes. I'm a hard worker who's willing to go the extra mile, but as they instituted more and more changes, I thought that those were unfair. So they cut back on our vacation. They did this, they did this, they did this. So I voiced my concerns to upper management because I believe in providing useful feedback to my employer. I do believe it is because I provided useful feedback in my old company that we did as well as we did, right? So when I saw problems at work, I would voice my concerns about them. They would sort of get addressed. And then like we did better as a whole team. And so I'm a team player, I'm a hard worker, but the company didn't really like that I was, you know, asking for things that I felt were fair. And so I think that those are good. I think the fact that the company is profitable and got acquired is like a sign that what I was doing is well. And if you let me come work for you, this is what you can expect. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be really invested. You can talk a little bit about that perfectionism. I mean, you don't want to talk about that in the interview, but I think it's okay. And at the same time, like, you know, if I have concerns with the way that the business is operating, I would hope that, you know, you would have an open mind to like those concerns. I'm not necessarily saying that you guys need to do it, but I'm someone who tends to provide feedback for the goal of like improving the mission of what we do here. And I was at a company that didn't want that, right? So they fired me, which I think is okay. Like, I don't think it was a good fit. So if you want someone who is a team player, a hard worker, and can build a business to the point where it's like lucrative and a lucrative acquisition, then I'm your person. But if you're looking for someone who, you know, is like, if y'all are looking to, actually, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't add a but, I would just stop there, right? So you can own who you are and you can own the fact that you got fired. And so you can sort of like let them make a decision on that, right? So be the person that you are and recognize that, you know, you have to be a little bit calculating there but if you want, yeah, you should just stop there. So there's some calculation here where you got to play, you know, a little bit of the game of like putting forward your best foot. You don't want to come across as a troublemaker, but at the same time, you want to say like, I share feedback with things, and based on that feedback, like things got better, right? And so I found that I was at a company that was really not interested in like the opinions of their employees, was not interested in feedback, and I didn't do anything negligent, right? They just decided to fire me, which is fine. Like, that's okay. If they don't want me there, I know I bring a lot of value to whatever team I'm on. I think the key thing that I would highlight here for this person's case is that the company got acquired, which means you were doing something right. Okay? And so that's when we kind of get to, so as you work through that, right? So then you think a little bit about, okay, why did I get fired? And like the answer is like, you got fired because you are willing to work hard, right? You have some of that toxic productivity, but you're learning to set boundaries. And so you didn't get fired because you were incompetent. Maybe you got fired because you were taking interviews on company time. So that's a mistake, right? So you got to be careful about that, right? So if they're paying you for an hour of work and you are doing something that is personally beneficial on company time, that's something that you should be careful about. But if the reason that you got fired is because you were setting boundaries with your employer and they did not like those boundaries and chose to fire you, I think that's fine, right? That's something that like you should do and is healthy for you, because you don't want to stay at that company. Like if they're cutting back on all your stuff and expecting the same level of work from you and not compensating you the same way, then that's like not really fair for you. There may be some considerations there, like if they're acquiring you and because of the pandemic, if business is slow or things like that. If this is, there's also an assumption I have here that this is like not a consolidation because things are bad, and this is a because y'all were doing a good job. So there's some aspects like that where companies have to make adjustments during difficult times. And so, but I'm not hearing that, you know, that's actually what is going on. And so what I'm hearing about why you got fired is maybe you did kind of screw up if you were like doing non-company work on company time. And the second thing is that like you were trying to set healthy boundaries for yourself, and you want to be at a company where people will like listen to what you have to say and you like get treated with respect, which I think is totally fine. And if they want to fire you, like that's okay. You can choose to part ways, right? Being fired doesn't mean that you're bad at your job. It just means that your employer no longer wants you doing that job because of all kinds of factors. So just like quitting doesn't, like if I quit my job, that doesn't mean that the job is bad. It just means I don't want to do it anymore, right? It doesn't mean that the employer is bad. Like I quit my job at Harvard Medical School and Massachusetts General Hospital. It's a wonderful place to work. It's just not the work that I wanted to do. It doesn't say anything bad about those things, right? Like they're still wonderful institutions. It's fantastic jobs. It's just not the one that I wanted. And similarly, like from an identity perspective, getting fired doesn't necessarily mean you were a bad person or bad at your job. It just means that your employer no longer wants you working in that position. Like there was someone recently like who laid off like 1,000 people on Zoom, right? For like better.com or something. And like That may have nothing to do with those people's work performance. It doesn't mean that you're bad at your job. Like, I don't know the details of that, but people fire employees. Like, an employment agreement is like between a company and an employee, right? Like, so you've got two parties that agree that, okay, this is an exchange of stuff that we are both comfortable with. And then either of those parties can say, hey, we're going to break up. And just because you break up does not mean that, like, you are deficient or they are deficient. Sometimes it does, but it doesn't always mean that. Okay? So now let's talk a little bit about behaviors. So this is where you've got to be a little careful. Okay? So if you're thinking about behaviors, like, what should I do next time? So this is the last piece of processing. So once we process our emotions, once we sort of work through our sense of identity and come to terms with who we are, we have to integrate our experience for the future. So this is the final step of processing. So how am I going to take everything that's happened and what am I going to do tomorrow? So in the case of the car accident, like, how am I going to drive? Okay, I'm oftentimes texting while I'm driving, so maybe I shouldn't do that, right? So you can, like, change what you do, okay? So from a business perspective, like, how should you change your behavior? So the first thing is, I would be a little bit careful about delivering feedback willy-nilly. So, like, if you're just kind of, like, delivering feedback all the time, so, like, constantly versus in a focused way, I think that may not be good, because this, delivering feedback all the time, is complaining. So you're going to come across in the workplace as like someone who just complains. And the interesting thing is that, like, the more often you say it, like, the less likely people are to take you seriously. So if your mom is, like, nagging you about doing the laundry and she tells you every 10 minutes, hey, put away the laundry, put away the laundry, put away the laundry, put away the laundry. She may have a point. You may have said you were going to do it, but what does it incline you to do? You're like, I don't want to do that. Right? So it's like, so I would adjust the way that you deliver your feedback. For sure. So if you have, like, particular complaints, like, I would synthesize them, deliver them, like, succinctly to your boss and say, hey, here's some concerns I have. What do you think about these concerns? So I do not think that, so this is the key thing. So here's a problem. So sometimes when people end up in this situation, I see a lot of this, like, sentiment on the internet, that I would regularly talk about how this behavior upset me with my coworkers, and I was close with it, and with some higher up managers I felt really comfortable talking to. Silly me. So the lesson that this person is taking away is, don't talk to your managers about what you are unhappy with. This is a dangerous lesson to learn. In my mind, this is the equivalent of stop driving, right? So this is where the place you work is very, very important. Because ideally, like, the best working scenario is where you can talk to your higher managers. And if you're a good manager, you want your employees talking to you about what's hard. All right. So I'll give you guys just a quick example about this. So when I was in residency at MGH, there was an issue where we would be on backup call. So what backup call means is that, like, some people are on call every single day, and then you have a week of backup call, which means that if someone gets sick somewhere in the hospital, you're the person who has to fill in if it's a vital kind of thing, right? So if someone is managing the emergency room overnight, if someone is doing consults in the hospital overnight, and they get sick and they can't reschedule because, like, you know, you can't close the emergency room because a doctor isn't working there and called in sick, right? It's not like an outpatient office where you can take a day off. Like, there's some things that you have to have a doctor there. So you have a person who's designated as backup. So the problem was that what would happen is, like, the utilization in the hospital was so high, like, the residency was big, right? So we've got, like, let me make sure I have this right. We have like 50 some odd residents, okay? So, and they're filling all these different roles at, like, different hospitals. So there's, like, a handful of hospitals. You've got 50 residents. On a week of backup, there's, like, a 60 to 70% chance on any given day that you get called in. So, like, 60 to 70% of the time, like, you can expect to work 3 or 4 of those days. Now, the challenge is that when you work those days, like, you have to stop doing your job. So your job is non-vital. So you're doing outpatient medicine. So I have my, like, therapy appointments and things like that, right? So those can be rescheduled. It's non-emergent things. Doesn't mean that they're not important, but it's non-emergent. So I can reschedule like a psychopharm appointment if I need to. So we were kind of frustrated with this because basically what happened is on the week of backup, like we would have to reschedule a bunch of patients because we knew we were going to get called in. We didn't know which day we were going to get called in, but chances are we're going to get called in statistically, right? Which means then I have to like make 8 phone calls, reschedule 8 patients, adjust my schedule and all that kind of stuff. And I do that once I've gotten called in. So they call me at like, let's say I've got therapy appointments tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and I get called at 7 p.m. Hey, the overnight person is sick. So I go to the hospital at 7 p.m. and then like while I'm working in the emergency room, I have to cancel my 8 a.m. appointment with someone else. So I call them at like 8 p.m. and I'm like, hey, I got to cancel my appointment. They may not get it in time. They may wake up tomorrow, not realize it, whatever. So our program went to our program leadership and we're like, hey, this is super frustrating. And it's like really hard for us because we have to like cancel patients all the time. So based on that feedback, our program leadership was awesome, by the way. And they were like, okay, so this is what we're going to have you do. Basically, from here on forward, when you are on primary backup, you no longer need to go to work because y'all get called in so much, right? So we like presented the stuff and we like gave it. I mean, I wasn't a big part of this. It was other people in the residency that did an awesome job. But they're like, hey, here's what's going on. We get called in 70% of the time. It's a real pain in the ass. We're not seeing these patients anyway. And the leadership was like, cool. Like, it's basically like a week of vacation. I mean, you can't leave. It's not vacation. But you guys don't have to do any other duties if you don't want to. You can be excused from all of your other clinical work. So that wouldn't have happened if you don't go talk to management about your concerns. And the key thing is like, is management like listening to you or not? Do they care about you or not? It doesn't mean that they have to do what you have to say because management may have 1,000 different things to consider that you are not aware of, right? So like they can't just make policies to make you happy because there are like other things involved, right? And so this is where the individual employees start to, like, this is what's challenging, is that, like, they may not understand that, right? Like, you just see things from your perspective. You don't understand, like, what the other needs that are pulling on management are. But this is where, in terms of, like, behavioral integration, you know, if you get fired from a job, it's like, what are the lessons that are correct to learn? Because not all the lessons that your mind learns are going to be correct. So from and this is what happens when you incorrectly process stuff, right? So if I'm dating someone and they cheat on me and the lesson that I learn is never date again, like that's an appropriate lesson. It's like a logical lesson, but it's not like the correct lesson. It's not the lesson that you learn from like processing. So oftentimes our behaviors will get adjusted in a drastic and sort of like very like black and white way, like don't ever talk to management, don't ever date again, don't ever drive again, right? Those are the things that until we correctly process, we start to like swing the pendulum in the other direction. And so proper processing is about thinking, okay, like what did I do right? Right? And what did I do wrong? And what can I do better? And then also, like, what should I continue doing? And I don't know if this makes sense, but all of these things are going to be influenced by your identity, by your emotional state. So if we talk about what is emotional, like how do you process an event, right? Whether it's your first kiss or like getting fired, it's going to involve all these steps. So like, let's run through the first kiss example. So, had my first kiss. Emotionally, I'm over the moon. Oh my God, I'm loved. She loves me. He loves me, whatever. I've become a Chad. I've left the realm of the betas and I've entered in the Chad mode. Behavior. Hey, when can we meet up? 15 minutes later. Hey, when can we meet up? Hey, when can we meet up? Hey, I've been thinking about you all the time. I've been thinking about you all the time. I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop thinking about you. Why aren't you texting me back? Why aren't you texting me back? Why aren't you texting me back? Did I do something wrong? What's going on? Did I screw up? Was I not a good kiss? Am I not a good kisser? Right? So even like a positive thing, if not processed correctly, if you don't consider how it affects your identity, if you don't consider how it affects your behaviors, will end up problematic. So the 3 fundamental steps of processing are, first of all, understand the emotions. Secondly, how those emotions are going to influence your view of yourself, whether in the confident realm or the non-confident realm, right? And then ultimately, that your emotions and your sense of identity changing are going to shape your behaviors. And that's where you got to be really careful, because there may be things that you need to be doing better, but there may be things that you actually don't want to change, right? Because now if the lesson you take away from this experience is don't ever talk to your managers, and you have a nice manager at a job and you have a problem, what you're doing is shooting yourself in the foot. You're handicapping yourself on delivering feedback. What you need to do is get better at delivering feedback, by all means. But I would argue that, like, if you're at a place where you cannot talk to your manager, that's not a good place to stay, right? It doesn't mean that they have to acquiesce to what you're saying all the time. It's just like, you know, like there are 2 sides to every story. And if your manager says, hey, by the way, the reason you got fired is because we were paying you to do this job, and instead of doing this job, you were looking for another job. Like, you can look for another job in your free time, right? And that's where, like, the ego really comes in. You got to be super careful here, because the ego will say, oh, they fired me because I was looking for another job. No, we didn't fire you because you were looking for a job. We fired you because you were looking for a job on company time when we were paying you to do something else, right? Like, and maybe they fired you because you were looking for another job, but that doesn't make sense, right? Like, I mean, maybe it does. I don't know. But like, so this is where you got to be super careful, especially about that identity or ego piece. And ultimately, processing is sort of like moving forward and integrating all these experiences in a healthy way, making like healthy adjustments. And how do you know it's a healthy adjustment? I mean, it's tricky, right? So that's where, like, if you go through this process of acknowledging your emotions, right? That's where, like, this is where the tricky thing comes in, because people say, okay, but how do I know it's healthy? And it's like, that starts up here. Because once you're of calm mind and once you understand your identity, you'll know which behaviors are healthy. The whole point is that you can't tell the difference between a healthy and an unhealthy adaptation until you do this prerequisite work, right? This is an example of an unhealthy adaptation. Because when was this written? Like, higher up in the paragraph. I guarantee, or I can't guarantee you, but I would say strongly that as this person continues to type these things out, if they were to, like, respond to this and, like, if I were to ask them, how do you feel about things now? What are you thinking now? That some of these sentiments at the top of the, like, paragraph would change, right? That's what emotional processing is. You start to develop detachment. You start to develop objectivity. You're no longer thinking with your emotions. You can acknowledge your emotions. You want to acknowledge the influence of your emotions. You may even want to listen to your emotions, but they're not controlling you. It's you listening to them. Emotions shouldn't be ignored. They should be integrated into your behaviors, right? They're a useful source of information. And that's what emotional processing is. Not just emotional processing, processing and experience, rather. Questions? It's not facts over feelings, okay? This is important. It's facts plus feelings, right? Because, like, just think, this is the stupid thing about facts over feelings. What is a fact? Right? Like, this is where, like, facts, so a lot of times people who say facts over feelings don't acknowledge that there's a step of interpretation of facts, right? Like, sure, like, fact is truth, but then that's not usually what we're actually talking about. There's usually some kind of interpretation. Like, 90% of the time, there's some kind of interpretation. And so, like, you have to acknowledge that interpretation, because it's just like, so I had a statistics professor once told me that, you know, statistics don't lie, right? Because they're facts. But statistics are like a bikini. What they reveal is enticing, but what they conceal is vital. So just because it's a statistical fact does not mean it is truth, right? There's an interpretation. I'll give you guys just a simple example. In order to get into medical school in the United States, if you are Asian or South Asian, you have to have higher scores than people of other ethnicities. Does that mean that Asians or South Asians are smarter than other people? No. Some people may interpret it that way. Some people may look at, like, GPAs of Asians and South Asians and say, oh, look, their GPAs are higher, therefore they're smarter. No, that's incorrect. The GPA being higher may be a fact, but the interpretation is very important. And this is where, like, if you guys listen to the parenting lecture, why do you think we're better at math? We're not like, it's not like biologically we're better at math, or maybe we are. I've never seen evidence to that effect. It's because when we're growing up, it's like my parents are like, they're making me do like multiplication tables at dinner time instead of like learning how to draw, right? It's because culturally we emphasize a certain thing. And this is the other thing about some of these like, you know, racial interpretations is like, it's not like if you go to India, everyone's Indian, right? So that difference doesn't exist there. There are all kinds of socioeconomic status, immigrant status, all kinds of diaspora effects for some of these things. But the fact is the fact, but there's always an interpretation, right? Like the overwhelming evidence is that like people who make conclusions about this kind of stuff are, there's a conclusion. It's not facts over feelings, it's facts plus feelings. You know, and this is the other thing is that you may not like, so I'll give you, to talk about the same example again. So back when I was a kid and I would like, you know, be walking by my parents' friends and they would ask me, who do you like more, your mom or your dad? If you guys remember that example, right? I'm looking at that. It seems like an innocent question. They're at, like, the fact is that they're asking about a preference that I have, right? That's the fact. But my feeling when everyone's looking at me and grinning is like an important piece of information. This is some kind of test. I'm on trial. They're looking for something, right? So emotions are our brain's way of giving us like information incredibly quickly because cognitive processing and analytical thinking are slow. It's type 2 reasoning. Daniel Kahneman. You guys want a book recommendation? Go read Thinking Fast and Slow. So our brain has realized, oh, by the way, we have this like awesome thing called the limbic system, which can give you instant answers and can like give you like pretty good indications of what you should be doing. There's shortcomings to it, right? Because it's like quick and dirty, but it works. You know? So it's not facts over feelings, it's facts plus feelings. That's really the right way to like approach things. Other questions? Thinking Fast and Slow is a hard read. You're damn right it is. It's a slog. Does this relate to Manipura Chakra meditation? Absolutely. Well done, King Krish Live. So Manipura Chakra meditation is something that I will use for emotional processing. All right, but there's no science behind that. That's just personal experience and clinical experience. That's what I mean. Okay, so someone's asking how to process what I can't pinpoint. When I meditate, I often feel sad, but I just can't figure out what it is. So that's the process, right? So like you're not at the point of fixing something yet. You're still at the diagnostic phase. So this is where I'd say continue to meditate, like sit down and journal, right? Like you'll be surprised at what comes up once you open the doors, right? Like, so open the doors to your mind and like see what comes out. So like you can start by asking like, what's making me sad? Right? What am I sad about? How do I know if what comes out is right or wrong? What comes out is not right or wrong. Right or wrong is a judgment. What comes out is an observation. Do y'all understand the difference? Right? So whatever comes out, comes out. Like that's just an observation. It's in your mind. Whether it's correct or incorrect is like not important yet. First, it's just what's there. So if something is making me sad, let's say someone was asking, how do I get out of the bad kisser mindset? If you have this mindset, like even if it's wrong, it's completely irrelevant, right? At this point, it just is. So you can say it's wrong. If I say like, I'm lazy and I shouldn't do this, how does that affect my life? Not one iota. The judgment of things as good and bad is not where the work is done. Okay? Y'all get that? Like, this is the biggest problem is we're so quick to judge and so slow to understand. Because the mind loves judging. Easy to judge, easy to criticize. Right? So one of the biggest problems nowadays, like we see this a lot on the internet, is like, it's very easy to criticize someone, but it's like very hard to like understand them. Because criticism is easy. Your mind jumps to judgments. Oh, this place sucks. This place has bad fries. This country is a crap hole. You know, these people are idiots. Right? Like, it's easy to, like, it's so easy to criticize. So difficult to understand. And there's a big Dunning-Kruger effect here too, where like, the more, like, you'll see this if you really pay attention, is you know, the less knowledgeable people are, the more likely they are to criticize. So like, if you go play a game of Dota or LoL or Valorant or whatever, you go to low MMR and you're a good MMR player, I guarantee you people will tell you what you're doing wrong. Right? You get a lot of people who have no idea what they're talking about that are quick to criticize. And that's just the nature of the mind. It's easy to judge. So start by understanding what you want first is observations. And once you observe, once you like start to really like open yourself up a little bit and just observe, then you can start to understand. And once you start to understand, then your judgment making capacity will be far, far improved. And that's why in our model, it's like emotional understanding comes first, identity understanding comes first, behavioral change comes last. Right? And this is the big problem, is that everyone is trying to shortcut to change. Everyone's trying to say like, okay, how do I fix this? And it's like, it's going to be hard. That's why just do it doesn't work. Why doesn't just do it work? It's because you can't jump straight to behavior. You have to go through the prerequisite psychological steps.